Welcome, everyone. I'm Mariquita Solis, the live stream host of all-creatures.org. All-creatures.org was founded in 1998 by Pastor Frank Hoffman and his first wife, Mary, and launched as the pioneer website in the United States for faith-based animal rights veganism. Today, led by our executive director, Tams Nicholson, we exist for all people seeking current animal rights, vegan resources, and offer decades of free animal rights and vegan content, including a huge repository of vegan sermons and Bible commentaries, animal rights strategies, free vegan authored books, recipes, upcoming events around the world, and the works of various vegan authors, poets, and artists. We also host current sites for almost 20 vegan and animal rights organizations, including Stop Crush, Unparalleled Suffering, and the Committee to Abolish Sports Hunting. We also maintain nearly 25 archival sites from animal rights, vegan activism of past decades. The bottom line is that we work to unite compassionate and empathetic humans across the globe from the past and the present who honor the dignity of each and every creature so that all beings thrive on a flourishing planet Earth. So today I'm excited to welcome everyone here and let us know who's watching, where you're joining from, and give StreamYard permission to use your name. And our guest speaker is someone who I've wanted to connect with for so long. So I'm very blessed to welcome Reverend Beth Love. Beth has been creating luscious, vibrant foods that deeply nourish on all levels palate, body, planet, heart, and soul for over 4 decades. She's a gifted teacher and speaker, an ordained New Thought minister, personal coach, and author of the Taste Like Love book series. Beth has brought a message of transformation to multiple audience with her speaking and facilitation skills in contexts as diverse as the California State Prison System, schools, churches and businesses, radio, local community television, and the Oprah Winfrey Show. She's known for her fierce commitment, wise counsel, strategic mind, and huge capacity for love. Reverend Beth's life calling has taken many twists and turns, but has always been centered on human transformation. She has taught in and run Montessori schools, helped to found a New Thought church, and served in various capacities in that community for over 20 years. Run nonprofit organizations focused on the topic of child abuse, and done extensive volunteer work with prison inmates. Her current focus is running Eat for the Earth, a nonprofit organization that supports the ongoing habitability of our Earth by making it easier for people to eat more plants and less animal products. Reverend Beth has two Montessori certificates, a bachelor's degree in community studies, a master's of divinity, and a certificate in plant based nutrition. I'm so impressed, Reverend Beth, and I'm so honored that you are here with your beautiful grace and wisdom and presence in this loving capacity of all dash creatures. So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Marquita, and thank you so much for all the work you're doing to support a more compassionate, just, kind, and healthy human presence on Earth.
Well, thank you for that. I try. I think we all are making a difference, chipping away every day, every little seed that we plant.
Absolutely.
It's yes. Well, you have done so much, and well, we have an hour, and so everybody that's watching, let us know your questions. If you have questions for Reverend Beth, at the end, we'll take some questions, um, and let us know again where you're watching from, and everyone on the replay as well. So, I'd love to hear about your vegan story. When did you become vegan, and what caused that transition?
Oh, that's such a wonderful question. So I'll go way back to my childhood when I was like preteen. My mother started getting interested in what was called then the health food movement, and she started looking into how food impacted our health. And gradually, over not a very long period of time, she started removing the white flour, the white sugar, the red meat, then all the meat, um, so that we were eventually, eating a whole food vegetarian diet. And I was a very geeky child, so I was very interested too, and so I was quite fascinated by how you could avoid cancer by avoiding these food chemicals, and how you could avoid constipation by avoiding white flour. I was very interested in. I was also the family baker at the time, so I started changing how I was baking, and I read the Diet for a Small Planet, and I read Adele Davis's cookbooks, and I started substituting healthier ingredients in my baked goods. I quickly became the family cook as well. So by the time I was in my teens, I was well established as a whole food vegetarian chef. Um, I was quite content that way for a long time, and at a certain point, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had become a major apologist for dairy because I was so addicted and because I loved it so much, particularly cheese, but other dairy products as well. And so my health had gotten better as a vegetarian, but I was still sick. I had been sick as a child, and I was still sick. I had terrible asthma. I had terrible, painful knees in my 30s, painful lower back. I had hay fever. My face would swell up like a balloon in the spring. And I was kind of ignoring all of that. I was not kind of, I was ignoring all of that. And then much later in my life, in the late 1980s, I got into a recovery program for it was called Codependence Anonymous. And even though my mom had gotten us on full food vegetarianism, and there were many other wonderful things about my childhood, it was on the whole very traumatic childhood. And I got into this program when I had a quick trip to the bottom and realized I needed some support. And one of the, like all 12-step programs, one of the steps is to make a decision to turn our life and our will over to the care of I call it a loving spiritual source, call it God, whatever, to turn our life and our will over to the care of this entity, this presence. Um, and I balked. I did not feel like I could surrender to that degree. And the reason I didn't think I could surrender to that degree is I was overcome by terror that if I turned my life and my will over to God, I would be told to eat meat, that God would make me eat meat, which I was like, as a vegetarian all that time, I was just like, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. And my 12-step friends were saying, why would God want you to eat meat? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But I was like, I was just so terrified that I just couldn't do the third step. And during that time period, I was walking down the street in the town that I lived in one weekend, and they were having a sidewalk sale. All the stores had things out on the sidewalk. And I walked by this bookstore, and this book fell out of the bookshelf onto the pavement in front of my feet. And I picked it up. It was called A Higher Taste. I can't remember the subtitle, but it was by the Hare Krishnas. And it was all about how when we dedicate our eating choices to the cause of doing no harm to any other living being, that's an elevated way of directing our choices. Now, the Hare Krishnas, some of them are vegan now, but they, at the time at least, were vegetarian. The book was vegetarian. So it wasn't asking me to change my diet, but it was a call to change the orientation around my diet, to change my motivation for eating the way I had. And it led to a realization that what God might want me to give up was an ego orientation to my eating. Because what I realized was that I was thinking I was coming from a very egoistic perspective of, I'm not going to eat that stuff. That's gross. That meat is gross. I'm not putting that in my body. And it was all about my health, my body, and it was not a most spiritually attuned way of thinking about my food. So I made a decision that I was going to rededicate my life, not just my diet, but my life, to the cause of doing no harm to the greatest extent to all living beings. And as a result, I had to go vegan, right? It didn't happen immediately, but through that choice, it made me have a little bit of an opening so that I could be more curious about the impact of my choices, which led me to understand the cruelties of the dairy industry, which are obviously far, far worse in many ways than the meat industry. And so ultimately it led to veganism.
Wow, that's a powerful story, and I love the way the book just came to you. I love it. And that you had that awareness. Wow. And the universe is always looking out for us and sending signs. And sometimes they're very subtle, and sometimes they're right in front of our face. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, I have had a number of incidents in my life where I get, like, here it is. Are you paying attention? And, that's all I have to do is pay attention, right?
Right. That's very true. I think about all the things I must be missing because I'm not paying attention. Right. That's a good reason to be very mindful as much as we can in our day.
Mhm.
So, well, that's wonderful. And so when you went vegan, did you have a lot of support with your family or friends?
Um, well, at that point, I don't think I needed it. I wasn't like a new vegan in some ways. All I did was, yeah, was already aware I was allergic to dairy. So I had been in a long period of what I call bargaining. Oh, well, I can't eat this kind of dairy, but I can't eat this. I can have yogurt. I can have these kinds of cheese. I can't have that, or I can take these homeopathic oral antigens. So I wasn't eating a lot of it. So I was already very largely vegan in my diet. I was still eating honey. That was another process I needed to go through. But I was so part of it is that I like to call myself an evolved Taurus, and that I don't think of myself as stubborn anymore. I think of myself as resolute. But once I make up my mind, it's easy for me. So I did not have a lot of support, no. But I did not at that point need it. But it is so essential for most people when they start out to have support. I would say that I have not had people actively working to undermine my veganism, but like most of us, I walk around in a world that gives a large amount of permission for people to act out their own discomfort with their decision based in the carnistic reality that it's okay to tease vegans, it's okay to ironize us. So, like everyone else, that's been a large response in my family. But I have surrounded myself with like-minded people, and that has been really, really helpful. So, joining groups, starting groups, and finding those people so that I am not, so that the majority of my interactions are with people who are supportive of and in alignment with my major life choice to harm to the best of my ability.
Yes, and it is very, very important for a lot of people to be, and most people to have, I mean, to have that support and to be surrounded. I talk to a lot of people that say they're so alone, and I like what you said about starting, being a start, right? If you're alone, take the action. That's the universe saying, you're the one, you're the spark,
Yeah,
right?
exactly,
To take
exactly.
action.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, if you're the one that sees the need, it's
Mhm.
got your name on it.
Right, because someone's waiting for you to step
Yeah. Yes.
up.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's beautiful. So what um how does the peace of not eating creatures manifest in your life today?
So it's not just about not eating. It's about, doing my absolute best not to do harm. So, carrying out the ants that come into the house rather than squishing them, and, doing my best to squish mosquitoes away, and, all the rest, on all levels. But, how it manifests is I do my best to both, I, I eat I eat whole food plant based. I don't describe my diet as vegan. I describe my ideology as vegan, but I differentiate between my diet and my ideology. There's nothing about my diet that doesn't align with my vegan values. But vegan diets can include Oreo cookies and Coca Cola and French fries and all kinds of stuff that I would not want to eat, because I am also a creature worthy of great stewardship. And so I want to be consistent in all my interactions with all creatures, including myself, and set an example for others. So it mostly manifests now largely in my home community and in my work, which is my whole life pretty much. That it's central to my life. It's the vegan values are central to my life. The whole food plant based is central to my work. We make a distinction at our work. The organization I founded as well. When I started the organization, I wanted to have the biggest tent possible because I had read How to Create a Vegan World, really wonderful book. If people haven't read that by what's his name? I'm forgetting his first name, Leonard. He really looked at the evidence about what supports this shift that we need to see. And one of the things that he pointed out is that it's easier to get 10 people to reduce than it is to get one person to go vegan. And so a lot of times I think the vegan movement, if our message is too narrow, we're missing so many people that could be part of the solution. So if everybody's got to be vegan to belong, then if everybody has to be vegan to belong to our movement, then we're not going to move as fast. And so what we find is that by making the ask, the ask to the community is easier for people to say yes to. It's eat less animal products and more plants to sustain all life on Earth. And the science shows, I mean, if you look at the plants and study, that if you do drastic reductions across the board, we can come into alignment with the Earth's planetary system. Boundaries of the Earth, we can still survive even if some people eat animal products. So I'm not encouraging people to eat animal products, but I'm recognizing that there's a huge amount of people that may not right now consider that they're going to go vegan, but they could see themselves being part of the solution. So that's our ask. But what we teach is hopefully plant-based, which is all hopefully plant-based. So yeah, I answered your question.
Right. And how do you, a lot of people won't accept that, won't accept that people are going to not be fully vegan, or that we're looking for all or nothing. Now, how can you sleep at night? I mean, like, when we see people that are struggling with that and they're angry because this person's not going all the way, and then they're saying, they don't really love animals, or they don't do this, or they don't do that. Now, how can we be at peace with letting people be on their journey?
Yeah, for me, I just am so clear that every change in the right direction is a change across the board that benefits across the board. So if somebody cuts their meat consumption by half, that's half the animals that they were killing before, and it's increasing their health, and it's contributing more to the habitability of the earth, the ongoing habitability of the earth. So they're making a contribution. I think that we hurt ourselves as vegans if we're dogmatic, because there's all this talk about vegans being angry and vegans being terrorists. I know that was created by the industry, but we have this image to overcome. And I think we just hurt ourselves. I've got a great story about that. When my husband and I went to buy our house, we wanted a vegan realtor. That's what we try to do. We try to support vegan businesses. If we're going to use a business, we look for a vegan. And we, not always, because it's nice to bring some others into the fold, but we found a vegan realtor, and she introduced us to her contractor husband. And she and the two of them described him as mostly vegan. So he became our contractor. He was helping us renovate our house and make it more environmentally sustainable. And we got into this conversation about what it mean, what that was. He's like kind of apologetic. This guy loves animals. They have a sanctuary. They have rescue pigs at their house. He loves animals. He's got the biggest heart in the world for animals. And so I asked him about this. Well, what do you mean you're mostly vegan? Tell me about that. He said that every 3 or 4 years he goes to visit his mother in England, and he eats what she feeds him. And I just cried when he said, like, that his love for his mother is causing him to feel like he's not good enough as a vegan. And I said, you are a vegan. Like, you are a vegan. You can consider yourself a vegan. And I stand by that. Like, he's eating what his mother serves him once or twice every 3 or 4 years. He's a vegan. He's living as a vegan. And I just think that we need to acknowledge that, acknowledge that when people are going as far as they can, that's enough for them. And if they're going that far, that's enough. So I just think that we hurt ourselves by being too stringent and making the club too small. Here's another great story. We had somebody who was so excited to come and interview for one of our housemate interviews, and it turned out we weren't vegan enough for this guy. And he was just like, he was so dogmatic. My husband has a leather belt. I have some old shoes in the yard that I bought, 30 years ago that I still walk out to the hot tub in, and we weren't vegan enough for him. And I just, it's like, that is not attractive. That's just not attractive. And we want to attract people. So we need to be joyful, show that this life is good, that we feel good inside about it, that we are at peace with ourselves and with the world. I'm not saying, as a minister, when I went to seminary, I learned about this thing where ministers should be both pastoral and prophetic. Like the pastoral part is you meet people where they are, you're loving, you're forgiving, you're open-hearted, but the prophetic part is you tell it like it is. And I think that we need to tell it like it is. We need to be really honest about what's going on in the world and the cause. The major cause of so much of the environmental destruction. Like, let's be honest about that. But let's also not forget that we need to be loving to attract.
I love everything you're saying because we have to be flexible and we have to be kind. We have to be understanding. I mean, the result of not being that is pushing people away. I guess we don't have to be, but if we want to be of an effective attractance and attract other people eating more plants, and there's a lot of pushback on saying I'm plant-based. There's a lot of attacks on people that say I'm plant-based. And I feel so sad when I see people saying, oh, that person was plant-based, and that they don't care about, animals, and they don't, for me, if they're eating plants, that's wonderful, right? And that is a transition to vegan many times. And
Right.
Also, for me, myself, being vegan, and then people saying, well, she was vegan, but she quit. She wasn't really vegan. She was plant-based. Well, I did the best I could. And it was hard for me. I struggled with food addictions and everything. I was vegan in my heart, and I still would say I was vegan. I just fell off the wagon like a human being. So I've done a lot of work on myself, and I recognize I'm a human being and a being that makes mistakes, and that's part of my journey. So I love to hear someone as empathetic as you, Beth, also saying that we have to be coming from compassion and being flexible, and letting go of this dogma and this judgment, and allowing people to do the best they can, and being kind to them.
Yeah, I want to say that, congratulations that you made it through your struggles. I mean, many people don't, and I think that's a really important thing for us to look at, is like, once somebody gets into veganism, like, how do we keep them into veganism? Like, how do we make it easier? That's, the goal of Eat for the Earth, is to make it easier for people to eat more plants and less animal products. Like, how do we create a context in which plant eating is more normalized? And I think that, I certainly don't mean to suggest that we don't also need those hardcore animal rights activists. I believe that there's so many different doors that people can come in, and someone, like Earthling Ed, who's out there, just like that's really powerful. And I'm not going to tell him to stop. I'm just going to say, let's make as many doors as possible. Let's make it as easy as possible for people to find some door into this movement, and trust that once they find their way in, whether it's for their health, for the environment, for the animals, because they care about the cause of everybody being able to eat, whatever their reason, they find out that, maybe they're just giving up beef because they find out about the terrible environmental footprint of beef. Whatever door they come in, nurture them once they get inside, and support them to make that more comprehensive shift, such that they understand all the good that's possible. And what I actually see in my work is that once people dip their toe in the door, even though a lot of the people that we work with are coming in for health is a huge motivator. I mean, pain pushes until vision pulls, and for most of us, we're being pushed by pain a lot more than we're being pulled by vision. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, pain is a great motivator. And so somebody gets pushed in by their pain, they get this diet, they see great improvements in their health, and guess what? because they're not engaging in the carnistic ritual of eating meat. Their protective mechanisms about that system decrease a little bit, and then their hearts are more open to find their way to veganism.
Yeah, that's very true. And having multiple doors to come in, and also, I mean, like you said, I mean, there are times that we have to be louder, be more vocal, like with when we're dealing with big corporations. So there's many different ways. So yeah, I love that. I love what, and I see that you're very heart centered, that, and you're very mindful about what you express and the way you express it. So that's very beautiful.
Thank you. I just do my best to get out of the way and let the higher self speak through.
Mm, I love that. Well, let's talk some about Eat for the Earth. How did that come about?
So you read my longer version of my bio, and so people heard that I've had a very varied career. As soon as I get really good at something, then God kind of boots me out and says, "Okay, it's time for you to do something else." And I'm always like, "Come on, God, I'm finally good at this. I'm finally comfortable." So such a moment happened in 2015 when I had been with this New Thought church that I had helped to found, and I was in many positions of leadership. I loved my work. I was over the families ministry since the beginning, founding families ministry, and children have always been central to my calling. I started in Montessori. For me, there's a big idea that I just know to be true, which is that if we can raise our children differently, we can change the world. That is the way to change the world, because if children are raised in such a way that they have their needs met, that they are kind people, that they know how to interact with each other in peaceful ways, like they'll grow up to be adults that can do those things, that have those skills, and that will make the world so much better. Um, so I was working with the children. I was working with the little children. They were meditating. Supervising the people that worked with all the ages of children, working with the families. I was also volunteering in a state prison when people heal their childhood wounds, and in ministry, praying with people, music ministry, all over the place. And I really loved my work, but I started hearing the universe saying, "It is time for me to go do something else." And I didn't know what that was, but I heeded the call. I've been in that place enough that I knew that I needed to call. Well, and also I got pushed. It's like like I said, the universe will give you a big enough sign. I got a big enough sign. I got to go. And I left, just living in this question of like, what's next, God? And within that first week, 2015, and Cowspiracy had just came out, and I watched Cowspiracy in that first week. And as a long-term vegan, whole food, plant-based person, someone with a scientific mind, I knew most of what was in the movie already. I couldn't cite the specific facts and figures, but I knew that animal agriculture was destroying the earth, destroying the habitability of the earth. The earth is indestructible, but we are destroying our chances of continuing to live here with the way we're living. And I knew that animal agriculture was the primary responsible industry. And so I just was like, I had this insight. I'm sitting in this restaurant with my husband, eating our vegan meals, and he's my husband is so just appreciative of me, and he's sitting there and he's just bathing me with all these appreciations about how I have this really big idea about the children of the world, and how we're really going to change things by raising the children differently. And usually I'm just like gobbling it up. I'm like, okay, come on, yeah, you're right. And I just said, thank you. But this time I'm just feeling this growing impatience inside. It's like, it's just growing and growing. And finally I just can't stop. I have to interrupt him, and I say, but what difference does it make if there's no habitable planet for these children to live on? Like, what difference does it make? And in that moment, I knew that that's why I didn't push it out of the work. And so I didn't formulate a really clear plan or anything. I just started teaching people how to eat plant-based. I opened up my kitchen. I started putting notice on Nextdoor, on Facebook. I'm having a free class, a donation-based class. I just, for 2 years, I just played in the kitchen with people. I started a short immersion program. I started talking to organizations. Um, I just started doing things for the purpose of getting people to eat plant-based, and realized after about 2 years that I had jumped into a rebound relationship, that I had left a relationship with an identity, essentially, as an ordained minister who was part of this church community that I had been part of so long, and I had left this identity. And instead of really grieving the losses, I had jumped into this really fun rebound relationship, and I had to kind of look, well, how much good am I doing? Like, what am I? Here's my goal. My goal is a habitable earth for our children. And here's what I'm doing to get to the goal. So here's the goal. Here's what I'm doing. They're like, they're super far apart. It's like I need to do something that makes a bigger change, makes a bigger difference. And so I took about a year off. And during that year, I talked to people. I met Dr. Sandra Rao and some other leaders in our movement during that time. And I just started talking to people, what's being done, what's not being done, what do you think of this idea, what do you think of this idea? And ultimately, the idea that resonated the most with me was do something local that also can contribute to the global movement. Like create models locally where I live that can change the context. Because like what I'm really, really clear about is that people are eating what they're eating because that is what the environment is telling them to eat. Like if we can change the environment, we can change what people are eating. And the environment is largely dictated by corporations. But if we can change that, if we can make a dent in the environment so that it's more natural, more normal, more necessary, more obvious, more common for people to eat plant-based than it is now, we're going to shift things in the right direction. So I'm like, okay, how do we create local models while simultaneously contributing to what's going on in the world? And so the Earth was born. It was launched on January 19, 2019 to a standing room only crowd. I have been talking to people about it. I put out an invitation to the community, free meal with a presentation. The Eat the Earth is launching, and we had many more people sign up than anticipated. So the venue was too small, and the rest is history. We're going from there.
Well, I love that story. I love how you looked carefully, like to see where the need is. And also the way that you were seeing how your life was in alignment with what you wanted. I mean, I love the thoughtfulness of your life.
Mm,
So,
thank you. Yeah, and I think I don't want to downplay as well that I think in terms of the need, there's other things I could have chosen that might have had an even bigger impact, but I had to choose something that fit my skill set. And starting a nonprofit organization was something I had done. Doing presentations in the community is something I had done. Teaching, I've been an educator since I was in my teens. So I choose something that was both impactful, but also something that was a good fit for me. And that's what I encourage people to do. There's so many ways to get involved in this movement. Pick something where you have some strengths, maybe not all the strengths. I mean, like we all have to stretch a little if we don't have to, but if we want to be our best selves, then stretching is a good thing. Having something be a little scary is amazing and can lead to really amazing things in the world. But I picked something that was doable for me, but also a stretch.
that's great advice, definitely. And if you're watching and have questions, please put the questions in the comments, and also please hit subscribe, y'all, because this is a very powerful conversation that we're having here. I feel very inspired, and many times I wonder how should I speak about my diet, because saying vegan, it can be a turnoff to people. But I have said we're going, like, so being on the Earth Care team at my church, we had an earth friendly luncheon potluck, right? Picnic. So people weren't, so when I wanted to say earth friendly, I did say earth friendly food, but then I have to define what that is. And I really like the words earth friendly food, because I feel like that's not something that people, it's not a deterrent. And I've been struggling to try to find the perfect words. And I think eating for the earth is a beautiful, has beautiful sentiment behind it, and it's non-threatening.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me too, it's like I make a distinction because diets don't have ideologies, so like when people say, is this vegan food? I'll say it's suitable for vegans. Um, there's nothing in it that a vegan would eat, but this is whole food plant based. This is whole plant foods, so it's like I have an ideology. My ideology is veganism, but my food doesn't have an ideology. So that's a way that I can feel really aligned with defining the diet differently than the lifestyle. Though I encourage people to adopt the idea of a plant-based lifestyle as well, because that is better than a diet. We don't want to just be dieting. Um, so yeah, that's great that you have a picnic and talked about it as friendly food. That's what we do too. We say healthy, sustainable food, and then we need to define what that means. It means
Right.
plants.
Yes, and I think more and more people are becoming aware. I think we're going up against systems that try to that are detracting from the impact of food choices on our climate. How do you combat those? I mean, this. Uh, I mean, seeing articles saying that the food choices really don't matter. I don't even know what to say to people that believe that. I mean, what would you say to someone that says that that eating beef doesn't hurt the planet?
Yeah. Yeah, I find that most people that say that it doesn't hurt the planet are invested in this idea that there's a sustainable way to grow beef. And
Uh,
if they're yeah, I haven't talked to many people that I know there are people that just they say, well, climate change isn't real, and the earth is fine. They don't even believe in anything like caring for the environment, and maybe they don't know that that is what we were charged with. Like a lot of people are religious and they might hold those views. I'm not typecasting. I'm religious myself, but sometimes people use the Bible to justify eating meat because they say that we were given dominion. And that word dominion in the Bible is actually better translated. The Hebrew word is better translated as stewardship. We were given the responsibility to steward this beautiful earth. So if there's people who are on that page, I don't usually even try to move them. It's like as somebody who's been familiar with and involved in movements for decades, in movements, you go after the people that you think have the most chance of moving. And as critical mass grows, then those outliers will eventually come to the fold. And I know that sometimes it happens. Like I hear sometimes on podcasts an interview with somebody who was a rodeo star or a beef rancher, um, going blank on her name, but our dear friend that was a cattle rancher, Renee. Um, they make the switch. So I know it can happen, but what I do is I'm more interested in finding the people who are at least curious or leaning in or or care about the environment or care about their health, right? And then we have something to work with. We have a starting place. So if it's those people that say that there's a sustainable way to raise beef, and they're invested in thinking that they're eating beef that's sustainable because it's grass fed or because it's regenerative or something like that, then I just bring up the issue of the world. Like, is it like what's your definition of sustainability? If it's sustainable for you, does that mean that everyone in the world can eat this way? Or is that just for, like, I try not to use the word elite because people get very offended but it's true. It's like the very elite perspective that I'm going to eat sustainable beef when this sustainable beef is taking up so much more land than that CAFO beef that somebody else is eating. So I try not to use the word, but I'm like, is it just that some people get to eat this, sustainable beef, or does it have to be available to everybody? And then I just talk about the land use and the amount of land and the fact that 99% of animal products eaten in the United States today are raised on CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations. And like what happens to meat consumption if suddenly those animals are all turned loose? Like how do we work that equation in terms of the confines of the land that we have? And how do we feed the growing population of the earth if we suddenly are using even more land than the 40 some percent of the ice free land that we're using now for animal products? Like how do we how do we make that a good work? We can't. There's no way to do it. So I try to find a way to do it. I really love to ask questions, though. I also love to give compelling information in very graphic form. So when we table, we have these environmental posters, and now we have to nutrition ones too, but they're really big graphic displays. Some of them are infographics, some are graphs. And there's one, for example, on this question of beef and greenhouse gas emissions, which isn't even the only destruction that beef is rotting. It's not just the climate; it's also the biodiversity loss. It's also the pollution of the water. It's also the excess water use. It's all the other things. The ocean dead zones, the runoff. These big pieces. One of them has the greenhouse gas emissions associated with producing 1 pound of many different types of food. And it's got the beef way up here, and then it's kind of gradually stepping down to where you have the tomatoes and things like that here. And nobody can see that. There's a little picture of a cow up on that top. There's pictures. It's very pictorial. People look at it and their mouth goes like that, and they say, I guess I need to give up beef. And then, if they look a little further, they see that it's all the animal products. Almost all of them are up higher than almost all the plants. So, it's, or we do the dairy poster where we show the different kinds of impacts of environmental impacts of dairy. And compare it to oat milk, compare it to soy milk, compare it to the different milks. And people, and then we feed them a piece of really tasty vegan cheese that we make, cultured whole food plant-based cashew cheese. And they're like, I'd be vegan if it wasn't for cheese. I think I could do it if I could make cheese like this in the recipe. So it's this formula we use: compelling information, really tasty food, and then give them the tools that you need to do it. It works really well.
Yeah, well, you're giving us some great ideas here. How to handle situations very peacefully, but very logically too, right from the heart, but very logically with the facts.
And not arguing. It's so important not
Right.
to argue. We have this one poster. It's the I think it is the greenhouse gas. I think it's the greenhouse gas ones. It might be the water one, where we had this guy that came to our booth and said, "You guys are misleading. This poster is misleading." And one of my volunteers stepped in there and tried to defend, and I kind of gently went in there and did a different thing where I just engaged in a conversation. Really, well, tell me what you think is misleading about it. And he thought that instead of pounds, we should have been using calories or protein, because his assumption, I think it was protein, because his assumption was that we need quality protein, right? There's the assumption, quality protein, which is from meat, which is all mythological. It's not, there's no basis in truth about this idea, but it has a big hold in the human imagination that we need protein, the best source, the protein is the nutrient of highest concern, that the best source of protein is meat. And, so this was operating in his mind. And so he's saying you should show the protein, because if you're just showing the pounds, it's not comparing apples to apples, is comparing apples to oranges. Protein is this beef is better. So even though it, creates more greenhouse gas emissions or uses more water or whatever it was, it's better. You're not comparing the right thing. So I just engaged in a conversation, and I said, yeah, I can really see your perspective. You're absolutely right. There's different things that could be compared. Now, we don't happen to have a chart that compares the environmental impact to produce, a kilocalorie, a kilocalorie or a gram of protein, but they look the same. They look really similar. But he had a good point, and I didn't want to push back against it. So, it's like having a conversation, letting them feel respected, and seeing if you can shift them just a little bit, or raise a question in their mind. What do you think about looking into since you're very concerned about the protein, what do you think about looking into the environmental impact of producing a gram of protein and comparing the foods? So just enter into a conversation rather than enter into an argument. I think we can make a lot more progress that way.
Yeah, and you're validating and listening, something that's so important, because if we don't validate their concerns and we just start defending ourselves and getting into that, the threat that is so threatening to people. So we really can make good headway by having those conversations and acknowledging, like you did, what his concerns were. So I mean that goes such a long way, and it's beautiful. And this is peaceful conversations. I mean, what is it called? The nonviolent communication. It's very important. Acknowledging and listening to people and validating them, and without any ridicule, without saying, I mean, we all can laugh when people say, "Oh, I need to get my protein." We all could snicker at them, but that's not going to help at all, and it's not going to make me feel good to I mean, in the end, I'm not hurt. I'm hurting myself by laughing at someone else. It's not kind. It's not kind to myself. It's not kind to them. So being mindful of how we present ourselves is so important. And I love what you're saying here.
Thank you.
So as the founder of Eat Your Earth, I mean, Eat for the Earth, Eat Your Earth, which is true too, because the earth is providing for us. She's our mother.
Yes.
How has your role changed throughout the years, and how has it grown?
That's a great question. When I started out, I had this particular model in mind, and it was 2019. It was January 2019, and the model was to have, excuse me, the model was to have a leadership team and people taking leadership in various areas, so that we could impact a lot of systems locally, and then also contribute to the movement, to keep track of what we were doing, to be in contact with the movement, the broader movement, to be contributing tools and ideas to the broader movement. And so we put together this leadership team of about 10 people, and each one of them was associated with one of our teams. So we had a outreach and education team, we had a schools team, we had a hospitals team, we had a food team, and I was I was part of most of them, but I was most active with the food team. I had certain responsibilities, and I had other people who were actually like for our education and outreach team, other people who were taking a lead in putting together our booth materials, getting a banner ordered, ordering literature, figuring out what we needed to set up a booth at these big environmental fairs like Earth Day, or at our local Veg Fest. And we mostly had a local presence, and we were building, but then suddenly 2020 happened, right? So I would say that my role shifted really radically with the pandemic, in that suddenly we were not able to do these local activities. We had a ton of stuff. We had, in our first year, we had tables maybe 10 times, 12 times. I can't remember the exact number. And we had already lined up so many tabling opportunities. It was our strongest team. And all of those got canceled one after the other. And so we quickly assembled an online education and outreach team, and we were fortunate to have a volunteer who had experience in the realm. People had been telling me to go online for years, and I'm like, I wouldn't even know where to start, blah, blah, blah. So suddenly, March 2020, I got my computer on the counter in my kitchen, and I'm teaching food prep classes. I'm going like this when I'm showing the food, and I'm going like this when I'm showing me. And it's like we just jumped online and started teaching, and we did our first webinar as part of a National Earth Week, and we started getting involved with the Climate Village Convergences and other, there was another organization we were very involved with, which I'm pulling a blank on the name of. Anyway, a very large international organization that works on climate and food issues, and just started getting in conversation with people around the world. In many ways, the pandemic was good for Eat for Your Earth. It did forge these relationships that now we're able to lean on, contribute to these larger communities. They know about Eat for Your Earth. We're able to provide models. And so in that way, the pandemic was very good, but in terms of our local presence, it just went, it just like really tanked during 2020. So we've had to rebuild that. So in terms of my role, I did become much more central because, there I was online teaching these classes involved in these collaboratives. That we reconfigured as a board, as a nonprofit organization in 2021. We had been just like the grassroots movement. I'd started nonprofits before, and I was like, I don't want the hassle of getting a board. We're just going to do it. We're just going to do it. And we started with a fiscal sponsor. We decided to get a fiscal sponsor so we could have the benefits of nonprofit organizations. And then it ended up to be really not a very good fiscal sponsor. And so it was another way that the universe was like, get over it, Beth, start a nonprofit. It was a really good decision. It was really, really good to start a nonprofit. So we have a board of directors. So we have a more formal structure now where I'm hired as the executive director. We have a board of directors. We now have another staff member, and we've raised funds to have a third staff member starting in July, and we're looking for funds to expand the staff further still. We still are very, very strong on volunteers. We're very strong on volunteer leadership. We have volunteers that in some cases lead events, or we have one volunteer starter program, and we're still doing that program. What I'm trying to do with this staff expansion is to really put myself into a role in which I'm mostly most of my work is focused on my strengths, because given that we're a very small organization, only 2 people, a lot of my time is on things that are not necessarily, it's not only that it's not my strengths to do bookkeeping or data entry, but also it's not doing the world the best good to have me doing data entry and bookkeeping. It's not, our organization is not doing the best that we can do having me do some of these things. So we're looking to build a team in such a way that I can focus more on education, on outreach, on presentations, on program development, on developing more partnerships, and having bigger impact.
Wow, well, that's quite a story, and I love the flexibility of it. When we're pushed with the universe saying, "Okay, we got to shift now. We got some tides coming in. We got some waves. We got all sorts of things going. How are we going to maneuver that? By fighting or by shifting ourselves?" So I love that story, and it seems like you've learned. I mean, you've had quite a learning journey.
Yeah, I mean, my life, one of my former mentors would say that every experience of your life is part of your unique ministry. And I really believe that's true, that every experience I've had, I mean, I use my Montessori training all the time. I was a Montessori teacher first. That was my first career. I started in my teens. I use that. I mean, it's central to what I do. I'm a minister. I'm an ordained minister. I've focused my life on children and on child development. I use that stuff all the time. We're always developing. I'm still developing. And I went to a business school for 3 or 4 years and studied spiritually attuned business. I use that all the time. It's like every experience is used, and it's all brought me to this place. And I just pray that God keeps me here for the rest of my life and doesn't move me again.
I'm praying for that also. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Well, just tell me exactly. I don't know much about Montessori. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What a Montessori, what's the mindset?
Yeah, so Maria Montessori was a revolutionary. She was a doctor. She was the first medical doctor in Rome, and first woman medical doctor in Rome, excuse me. And she came from a very scientific perspective, and she was asked to help out with some children at a tenement in Rome, and from very, very poor families. And she was supposed to be helping with their health, but because of her scientific bent, she was studying the children, and she was noticing that when their needs were met by the environment, that they were behaving really well, and that they were happy and content, and that all was well, and that when their needs weren't being met, that wasn't happening. Okay, now that seems really obvious to us, I think, in these days, but this is like way back in the 1800s. And so she just started experimenting and bringing in different things to see how she could best. It was partly experimentation, but it was also largely observation. Like, what are the children attracted to? What do they need? What is helping their formation? And so, as a Montessorian, I think about Montessori from that kind of pure perspective of like, let's see how we can best support development. Like, what are the obstacles in the environment to people fully developing in a way that is useful for their own life and contributing to the good of all. And I don't mean like, I'm not talking about productivity in the way the schools, public schools are training people up to be cogs in a wheel. I'm talking about how can we help people be fulfilled? How can we help people realize their own potential and contribute something that's exciting to them to give, because we can change the world if people are doing something that they're passionate about and that isn't hurting anybody. And so I think about Montessori in that way rather than some kind of dogmatic way, having to do this and then do this and do that. But it really does work very well with children, and it turns out it works with adults too. If you have your needs met, you're more content. And I studied nonviolent communication as well, which that's the same basis for nonviolent communication. So, but Montessori is recognizes that there's an order in the environment, and that we find order in our environment.
Well, that's beautiful. That's wonderful to know, and it makes a lot of sense. I want to show a couple comments. I see that we're coming to the end of the hour, but thank you, Mark, for saying this. I've been vegetarian 55 years, vegan 45 years. The two of you are really inspiring, especially your positivity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
And then he also has a question here. Animal agriculture is the major driver of global warming. When will climate scientists talk about that? They lie by omission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really hard. I'll tell you, my son and his wife worked really hard. They're young. He's 38. She's a little younger. They worked very hard to buy their first house a number of years ago, and they worked very hard to keep their house up, to maintain it, and to improve it. And they just finished. Doing a remodel in their garage, so she could have an office out there. And yesterday, they lost their house in a fire in Altadena. And they're climate refugees. And it's really very difficult for those of us who know the truth to see the amount of information that comes out about the climate and all of the other things too. I mean, it's not just the climate. I really want to stress that the climate is the thing that's on everybody's mind. But biodiversity loss, my gosh, we're in the midst of the sixth mass extinction. We are so changing the earth with animal agriculture by taking over all the land. It's the loss of habitation, of habitats. It's the loss of fresh water. It's so many issues. And to be aware of that and to see how little attention that gets from the scientists, from the press, from the policymakers, from the environmentalists who are and could be our allies, is very heartbreaking. It's very hard. And what I try to do is just make allies of people where I think that I can make some shifts. In our county, there's a very powerful organization called Santa Cruz Climate Action Network that has the ear of local elected officials, that has done a ton of work for a very long time on the environment. And I volunteer to become part of the leadership team so that this issue could be front and center with environmentalists. And not all of them have moved, but some of them have moved, and some of them are my best allies now. So even though this is not their primary issue, when they're having a conversation with an elected official, I don't have to be there to make sure the food is on the table. When they're out tabling in the community, they have an interactive exercise on the table that shows the carbon footprint of different foods. They're amplifying our voice. And I think that that's really a huge key, is to get our movement, the environmental movement, on board with the food issue, and then perhaps we can push the needle. There's lots of scientists who are telling the truth. That's how come we have the information, but it's not the majority. And so I feel you, Mark, and thank you for the question.
Yes, and I recently was certified as a climate healer, and so I really recommend that. And I know that you've been to the VCOPs. We have one coming up at the end of the month, the 25th, 26th, which is going to be focused on rewilding. And I'm working on something with Vegan Land Movement, who are really working in the UK to get that land and save that land so it's not taken over by animal agriculture. But I think it's so important to educate ourselves and get with a core team of friends and people that are making, taking action. So, yeah, I really suggest that also. Check out climatehealers.org. And I
Yeah.
also, um, let me say this real quick for everybody. Please don't forget to go to www.all-creatures.org to check out the hundreds of thousands of pages of free resources updated daily, 7 days a week without break, or sign up for our weekly newsletter. And please be sure to search vegan churches on our site to find vegan faith-based resources near you. And if you know of one that's not on the site, please reach out to our executive director, Tams, at all-creatures.org. Um, and but back to the back to that issue. Sorry to interrupt there, but I just I mean, Climate Healers is a great organization. Eat for the Earth. What else could you recommend, Beth?
In terms of the facing the truth about animal agriculture and its impact on the earth. I think
Yeah.
for us as individuals, one thing is to keep our spirits up. So it's that pastoral. It's being pastoral and prophetic with ourselves. Like tell the truth, don't lie, but also look for things to hope. I mean, look for ways to maintain our hopefulness, because if we are so depressed by the situation that we're immobilized, then we're no good. So I would say like plant-based treaty. If you look at how many different cities are signing the plant-based treaty now, it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have teeth, but it's like at least an endorsement. It's at least recognition, at least get some publicity for the fact that we need to be plant-based. So look for those things that are happening, those good things that are happening. I mean, there are governments all over the world that are adopting policies to reduce their animal product purchases. There's New York City. Look at New York City as an example, where the default meal that you get in a hospital in New York City is plant based, and if you don't want that one, the second one is also plant based. You have to go to the third meal to get a meat meal or an animal based meal. And most people are eating the default meals. Most people are eating plant based when they're in the hospital in New York City. The schools in New York City are serving plant based food. So look for those examples and see if you can emulate them in your community. I mean, that's what we're doing here. Like we're starting to have a conversation with the hospital here. Like, why can't we do that here too? We're starting to have a conversation. We've had some conversations in schools. We made a little bit of inroad in schools. Where's the place where you've made a difference? The place where we've made two places where we made the biggest difference. One of them is in healthcare locally. We had a conference for healthcare providers where we brought Dr. Michael Clapper, Dr. Columbus Batiste, some other plant-based docs to talk to healthcare providers in our area. We also had an online version, so we had people from other places, but to educate them about the power of plant-based diets to heal. And with that evidence in front of them, most of the participants that left said that they were going to change their practice um, going forward based on what they learned. And people said, I'm gonna suggest my patients do whole food plant based before I offer medication and surgery. I mean, like there's a place to make progress. And the other side of it is that we're also working with individuals. We have partnerships with clinics that serve low income people, and they refer patients to us and give us space to do a whole food plant based immersion 2 weeks. And they see their patients diabetic, 2 weeks later, normal glucose, high cholesterol, 2 weeks later, normal or optimal cholesterol. I mean, it's like go where you can, see where there's an opening for you to make a difference in your community, and then we can together somehow. I just pray and hope and vision for a kind, compassionate, just, well-fed, healthy, sustainable human presence on Earth. And I must believe it's possible while I simultaneously acknowledge that my son and his wife just lost their house. That we need to be on it. We need to be on it. We need to be on it. The need is so great, and the time is now.
Yes, and my prayers go out. My heart goes out to your son and his family and all those in California that have lost and are in such this devastating the consequences of the fires. So my goodness, I can't even wrap my head around that. So my heart's with them.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
well, Beth, so everyone can reach you where?
Um, you can email me at admin@eatfortheearth.org. That's all spelled out, eat for the earth, FOR, and admin. And you can find Eat for the Earth at eatfortheearth.org. You can also find us on Facebook. I imagine you'll have show notes, the links in those.
Yes, the website is on there. So, would you close us with a little prayer, Beth?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'd like to. Let's just take a deep cleansing breath together. Let's let it out. Let's take another deep cleansing breath. We allow the breath to take us back to center, back to that place of unitary wholeness where we remember that we are living and moving and having our being in a universe of sufficiency, a universe of good, a friendly universe that is always for us and never against us. And we relax into this goodness, we relax into this perfection, into this wholeness. And we remember in this place that we are one with this one, that there is only one thing and it is good and only good. And it is expressing perfectly through each one listening to this show, through Marikita, through me, it is expressing perfectly in the most divine and perfect way. And we remember in this moment that this earth that we are living on is so worthy of great stewardship, and that these body temples that we have been given to use in the world, to touch, to love, to create, to learn, that these body temples are so worthy of great stewardship. And we pause to remember that we are living on an earth that is populated by so many beautiful beings, all worthy of great stewardship, that we are only one here, that we may be expressing in myriad forms, but there is only one. And that one is sacred. And so we show up this day a little more fierce in our compassion, a little stronger in our advocacy, a little more surrendered in our trust in the great one that is moving in as and through all of us. And we know that all is well. And even as our hearts break open, as we see the destruction that humans have wrought because we have forgotten who we are buoyed up in our knowing that something else is possible. And it is in this sense of holding possibility consciousness that we show up this day, knowing that we can be models for others, that people are watching and that they are taking note, and that as we show up as beacons of light in the world so needing light, that people want to have what we have. And that opens their hearts to our cause of a vegan world. And so I am so very grateful for this time together. I know that something has shifted in the universe in response to this conversation, that it ripples out in time and space, and that whoever needs to hear this word hears this word. I bless Marikita and her ministry. I bless all creatures.org and its ministry. And I know and trust for Eat the Earth that we are also blessed, and that something good happens from this connection. I'm in deep gratitude. There's nothing left to do except to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, beloved one. We let this treatment go. We know that it cannot return void, that it is in your capable care. So we just let it be. It is done. And so it is.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. I felt like I was going around in that dynamic of a beautiful feminine circle, that energy of flow. I was wondering, am I spinning around in front of the camera?
Thanks, Nikita. Thanks for asking me to do that. That's so fun, and I don't usually get asked to do that in a podcast.
Well, I love that. And this has been such a blessing, Reverend Beth. And thank you, Mark, and everyone that's watching, everybody on the replay. Please reach out to Beth and Eat for the Earth. And I love what she's saying. Be the model. See how you can model that in your community. So thank you, Beth, and thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Marikita. Really, really a pleasure. Take care, everybody.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye bye.